My name is Jonathon Meades, and this series is called Even Further Abroad. It peels off the drab grey overcoat of preconception to reveal the lime green posing pouch of reality beneath.
Oh, yeah. Oh, do it to me. Oh, yeah. Oh, 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 yeah. Oh, backdoor jackpot. Yeah, you're soft stallion.
Don't tell me. Tell your friends. How does that feel, huh? Can you feel my throbbing horsehood? Can you? Say you can.
Yeah.
There's no passing expression.
I'm here to tell you about breeding. What you get from breeding is bread. Some bread is well bred, and some bread is ill bred. It all depends what goes into the mix and how it's kept after it's been baked. As with bread, so with horses. So, anyway, with the species called thoroughbred. Thoroughbred is but a photo finish away from inbred. To the unpracticed eye, there is nothing to choose between the inbred and the thoroughbred. The expert, however, can immediately distinguish between the two. The expert can distinguish the thoroughbred Newmarket sausage from the inbred imposter. Newmarket, there's the name. In the annals of bread, breeding, sausage and stock, there's nowhere to match Newmarket. Something happens to the land when you get close to Newmarket. The town has 66 stables, 35 stud farms, 4,000 racehorses producing 200 tons of manure per week, more flies than anyone can count, and 3,500 horse people. The characteristic East Anglian landscape of pined windbreakers entwined by creepers, of prairies and arable monotony, is all of a sudden extinguished. The verges are clipped. The hedges are almost topiarized. The country is subjected to a makeover which renders it unique in England. The English ideal for more than 200 years has been to tweak nature so that it looks more like nature than the real thing. The Newmarket effect is very obviously otherwise. Here, man's mark is plain for all to see. This is all that a high-class horse will ever know. Newmarket from conception to death. This town provides everything for the horse. Maternity homes, playgroups, foster mothers, best friends, beauty clinics, an education in speed, abundant job opportunities, and at every stage of this progress, servants and white post and rail. Acre upon acre is striped with this fencing. Acre upon acre is tended with the same tidy severity. It's as though the gods of equine perfection decreed that horses created by artifice must inhabit a land created by artifice. Thus an equivalence is achieved between genes and environment, between tampered with nature and high-performance nurture. These beasts are made from what are supposed to be the best possible ingredients. They're commensurately raised in verdant opulence, waited on hand, foot and hock by athlete's footmen, succored, rehearsed, fine-tuned. They pass their days in surroundings which seem just too good to be true. Surroundings which fill one with foreboding. This perfect calm surely cannot last. This clipped immaculacy must hide secrets. But we know what they are. These are the Stepford horses. It's the turf which sealed Newmarket's fate as the epicentre of racing. The way the word turf stands for racing makes sense when you see the sheer extent of it, when you feel the spring and bounce. There's quantity and quality here. And once again, seed and breeding count for everything.
We have some 30 men who work on the training ground starting very early in the morning and working right throughout the day in maintaining those training grounds. So a good deal of our time is concentrated on getting the condition of the turf absolutely right, the length and density of the sward, which provides a consistent yet cushioned surface for the training activity to happen on.
The fanatical tidiness is a sort of crutch, a fixed and certain point in an otherwise mercurial, edgy world where just about everything else is a punt. The sport of kings is the industry of chances. All this fosters the illusion of certainty, security. Newmarket is the fiefdom of the Jockey Club, which, needless to say, does not admit jockeys. The Jockey Club is like the RFU or the MCC, but upper rather than middle class. It's much posher, much fartier, and it administers racing with a patrician hauteur. In Newmarket, it runs the 2 race courses, the gallops, and the all-weather track. It grants licenses to jockeys and trainers. It also withdraws them in horse courts. In the closed, incestuous world of flat racing, it is almost as omnipotent as money. What is immediately apparent from these mug shots of the Jockey Club's members in the coyly named Rogues Gallery is the bias over the last century towards soldiers. The quasi-official taste of Newmarket is an offshoot of military taste, which is all chappish mistrust of imagination, easy comprehensibility, confirmation of prejudice. Without, the HQ of British racing is predictably neo-Georgian of the early 30s, though it's better detailed than barracks and messes of the same period in the same style. Within, it's a monument to moribund painting. Wall after wall celebrates horses and racing. Rather, wall after wall acknowledges horses and racing. These dutiful reproductions can hardly be deemed celebrations. They're likenesses, which of course is all that's required. The important thing is that they should be executed in oil paint, a medium in which the artless possess a confident faith. Equine art reached its zenith more than 200 years ago and has gone downhill ever since. This art in stasis extends to a sort of mummification in metal called sculpture, which differs from painting in being impervious to rain and thus capable of public display. The hedges recall those round war memorials, and indeed these very dead, very lifeless horses are the town's heroes. It's on them and their like that the town's survival has depended. What this master race of horses does for the microeconomy is equally acknowledged by the creation of equestrian walkways. They announce the horse's primacy. They cut a swathe through the urban fabric, like motorways of that distant era when the car was salvation rather than toxic criminal.
Before they become professional inseminators and career mothers, thoroughbreds are the most expensive athletes on earth, the most expensive racing machines, 20 times as expensive as a Formula One car. On Newmarket Heath, there are artificial surfaces which simulate good going and allow them to train in the worst weather. They're the most focused of athletes. You don't often hear about racehorses going to raves, misbehaving with hotel staff, selling the stories of their drug habits and going into recovery.
Most of a racehorse's life is spent actually not working, but resting. Unlike actors, they rarely do rest. They don't sell antiques or drive minicabs. Like actors, however, they do workshop.
The body, the instrument, is prepared with the assistance of apparatus, which suggests a creepy health farm run by a doctor whose consultancy is in sadism.
There's the horse walker. There's the lunging ring. There's the swimming pool, the partially padded swimming pool, which is necessity, not luxury. All of these devices require horses to go round and round.
These creatures' ultimate job may be to get to a fixed point in a hurry. That doesn't mean that the circumferential amble has no part in their schedule.
Rings are central to the ritual of racing. At tracks, they fulfill a purely ceremonial purpose. This is where runners are paraded before they compete. This is where owners, jockeys, trainers, and high-placed hangers-on congregate. Football stadia and cricket grounds are gaining new audiences as a direct result of having renewed their buildings. Apart from at Epsom, racing's public is treated to an unashamed display of soduism. Facilities are old, but not old enough to be charming.
The old order, a spurious old order, reigns supreme.
2 furlong start and the mists over on the far side of the course.
The toffs, dressed in the uniform of that bogus figure, the English gentleman, shunt between paddock and grandstand, between bar and corporate hospitality.
The proles, dressed in the uniform of the new Brit, attend something which has affinities with a travelling fair.
Striped cap, being followed the first by 24.
Both lots evidently take a perverse joy in having to rough it. Newmarket rolls into two of Lemuel Gulliver's destinations. The land of the Pacific, wise, gentle Nims, onomatopoeic horses, and Lilliput. It's easy to believe that a second form of genetic engineering is practiced here, that mechanicals kidnap boy teenagers and muck about with their pituitary glands to stifle growth, and so achieve a breed of tinies who are fit only to ride. So far as I can determine, this doesn't happen. Yet.
It doesn't need to happen, for Newmarket is a magnet for the diminutive. Children who've never ridden, children from the industrial heartland who've never even seen a horse, save for a shivering nag in a field full of scrap and nicked JCBs, come here to seek their fortune. Like boxing and rock and roll, it's a route to gelt and celebrity. Like boxing and rock and roll, it has its own trade disease.
Boxing has brain damage and detached retinas.
Rock and roll has auto-asphyxia, own vomit syndrome. Racing has kidney failure. The pressing need to keep weight down extends to self-denial of liquids. A mere glass of water can tip the scales.
Jockeys are dietetically determined. Like boxers and rockers, many aspire and few achieve.
It's your last time around, give it a name. 6. Oh, what? 30 pound of 573, what you get?
It's precisely because racing fulfills a non-essential function that so much money is thrown at it. Stables aren't farms which produce anything so banal as milk or meat. They produce speed. The greatest, most addicted owners do horse the way that the moderately rich do cocaine. The fact that horse is a Beat Generation euphemism for heroin is neither here nor there. Horses are a drug. Non-psychotropic maybe, but a drug nonetheless.
160,000 gentlemen on top, any chance? At 116,000 that I sell here against the back wall as well. At 116,000 top of the stairs, one more sell. At 116,000 and so. John Ferguson does that.
And the dealer's wares are shown to best advantage in the place you'd expect, at the point of sale. Tattersalls' bizarre beauty flatters horses. Its precision reflects on them. It suggests that every one of them is a champ in the making, a contender.
When you buy here, you buy expectation, hope, promise. You buy as an act of faith in the genetic mix, as an act of trust and potential. In other words, you gamble.
I stand at this time at 4-5. Good doctor. Thank you very much indeed.
Newmarket, the mecca of racing, is currently dominated by the Dubai royal family.
The Maktoum brothers between them own more than 1,000 horses. They're more powerful than the Jockey Club. This hideous house proclaims their position with unmistakable literality. It was designed by an architect who specializes in prisons, and it might be the redoubt of someone bent on world domination rather than mere turf domination. It was probably airlifted from the Gulf.
But it's oddly apt in this strange, manicured, un-English terrain. Newmarket is a weirdly international town, a stopover for the immensely wealthy. In some regards, it has more in common with Closters and Monte Carlo than with its neighbours such as Bury St Edmunds and Thetford. And it's different from those towns too in its dependence upon racing. All of Newmarket's commercial enterprises are part of a monoculture.
Equestrian art galleries, bloodstock agents, saddlers, farriers,
Vets, vets, vets.
and horse supermarkets.
Few towns of this size possess so many large late Victorian and Edwardian houses. They lend it the air of a grim resort, which is what it is when the races or sales are on. They were built for the turf's grandees. They exhibit the brusque timidity which is the Newmarket style, none of that arty cleverness which might offend the aesthetic pygmies of the racing establishment.
This lodge to the demolished Cavenham Hall, childhood home incidentally of Jimmy Goldsmith, the would-be ruler of the universe, is the exception which proves the rule. It's one of the few buildings which displays any flair or delight in invention. A stash of horses is always enclosed. They're stallagged, protected, constantly surveyed. Stables are fully serviced bedsits. Newmarket's 19th century stables are lit, mostly ventilated and entirely serviced from one side. They're like rooms giving onto a corridor, real or imaginary.
Trainers are like schoolmasters, really. I'm the schoolmaster or the headmaster. The horses are the pupils, the owners are the parents, and the racecourse is the exam. Good, just turn him over, Julie, will you? Come on over, fella.
The defining feature of racing stables is the clock. They belong to an era before the wristwatch, when even the pocket watch was not the lot of every worker, when the time had to be publicly told. Of course, a clock is an excuse, if one were needed, to add a vertical emphasis to a predominantly horizontal building. A clock is also an instrument of control. It impresses the need for adherence to the daily schedule. It reminds workers that their time is not their own, that time belongs to the stables and to their employer. Reveille, 4:30 a.m, and we're late. Consequently, this is the northernmost town in Europe to take a siesta. This old order, quaint or quasi-surf according to taste, pertains even on the Hamilton Road, where in the boom years of the 80s, the Jockey Club released parcels of land for new stables. The results are aesthetically dispiriting. The stables, based on American models, are sheds. The advantage of this system is not only to horse, but to its servants. A rare indulgence of a caste which knows its place, which knows how to say, sir. A stable lad is a private who may rise to be an NCO, but will seldom leap the invisible barrier and become an officer. Newmarket possesses an absolute candour about this caste system, and it no doubt despises the first-name term's hypocrisy of the dissembled, covered hierarchies which exist elsewhere. A successful jockey may rise to live in a marble palace. Lads live in tied cottages, barracks, dorms. Still, there are compensations. A town of 16,000 people with 4 nightclubs? I said it was unique. There are solaces to be found in shagging and in drinking. And, of course, in betting.
Badly now into 5-1, having touched 14-1, opened up 12s. Time to
inside knowledge, surefire tips, hunches, insane optimism. Thus do failed shorties obliterate their broken dreams.
Favourite still stately dancer at 3s.
The punts made on horses with bookies are nothing to those made by owners, trainers, bloodstock agents. Breeding is a phenomenally expensive gamble. Most of us who are not on the game exercise some degree of free will in our choice of sexual partners. Thoroughbreds, however, follow orders when they mate. They're obliged to enter into trial marriages as often as 3 times a day in order to produce the goods. Mares at stud lead a communal existence, like nuns who've been visited by a horse called Jesus. Stallions do not live with other stallions. They're not mixers, they're blokes.
They fight if they're put in fields with each other. They live with their human keeper in purpose-built accommodation that's passed down from stallion to stallion.
My grandfather lived in this bungalow who looked after isinglass, and my mum was born there, and also I lived in there for 32 years. Well, it seemed strange at first when we first moved in there, but we got used to it after a while, for hearing the horse rumble about in the box, and you can't help hearing him because he's up and down messing about all the time, you know, but when he's laid down and that, you can hear everything he does. I'm about to retire and I'm going to turn it over to my assistant, Dale.
Both sexes live in segregated splendour in this garden city of equine love. Their meetings are strictly controlled, they're chaperoned. But nonetheless, they do get to go the whole way on the first date. Eugenics may now be discredited, but the crude genetic magic called euhippics is the literal lifeblood of Newmarket.
Say you put together Denver Boot and Recidivist. And Denver Boot is out of Leprous Scally by Pearl Necklace, and Recidivist is out of Lavender Bandit by One Hell of a Richard. And say all of these horses and all of their forebears have won classic races and have been toasted by the nation. The aim is to reproduce them, to blend together bits of the sanguinary past into a machine for winning future races.
They rendezvous in great padded cathedrals of conception.
The aim of breeding is nothing less than willed reincarnation. It seeks to replicate the triumphant musculature of dead ancestors.
Ancestors whose seed was worth its weight in gold, but whose cold flesh, well, let's say that if a horse goes to Belgium for human consumption, its meat may be worth £800. A more common fate after it's passed the last finishing post and trotted into the big paddock in the sky is the can. Horses posthumously provide for thoroughbred dogs in everyday acts of transgenic generosity.
Come on, my son! Come on!
You dog!
Jonathon Meades goes Dutch next Wednesday at the same time, 10 o'clock.